Letter 4, the Dera, September the 8th, 1932. Beloved children of the dawn. Greetings from the beloved Master and from all Satsangis in India. How we wish you could have been with us during the past 6 weeks. Many and varied have been the experiences. The delightful breezes of the Arabian Sea were a blessing to soul and body. But the time came to leave the coast. It appears that while time is no item in the successive ages of the soul, yet to this short-lived body, time seems always to be crowding us. The Master and party left the coast for Hyderabad on the 10th of August, this disciple remaining behind to look after a sick member of our party. He then rejoined the Master 2 days later in Hyderabad, where we were all entertained in the elegant home of Devan Sahib, an executive officer in the North Western Railway. He is, of course, a disciple of the Master. This is Hyderabad Sindh, to distinguish it from Hyderabad Deccan. It is a beautiful little city lying along the banks of the Indus River. Here the Master, as usual, held satsang, attended by enthusiastic crowds. Satsang in Hyderabad Sindh. At the first evening satsang held here, an old man insisted on arguing with the Master, although he had been an initiate for over 30 years. This is something that is almost incomprehensible. How many human beings who have accepted the Master as a master can then sit down and argue with him is one of the deep mysteries to this student. Later this man came to ask advice of the Master, claiming that he had never been able to go inside or to get any satisfactory results from his meditations. Of course not. How could he expect results? He was manifestly suffering from one form of that deadly malady, egotism. It is a disease that manifests itself in more forms than neurasthenia. Anyone who can bring himself to contradict and argue with a Master surely has that disease in a malignant form. How could he expect to go inside? He may never hope for spiritual success so long as he has it. Happily, this sort of thing is very rare among satsangis in this country. A beautiful humility is the rule, so far as this disciple can see. Along the banks of the Indus. August the 13th, we accompanied the Master for a ride over the city and out to a park on the banks of the Indus River. The river is now quite swollen from rains and from melted snows high up in the Himalayas. This river is probably 2,000 miles long, and at this point is about 3/4 of a mile wide, although in the deep mountain gorges it narrows down to 60 feet or less. We walked down the riverbank for a short way, close by its turbulent waters, and this disciple wondered how many Mahatmas had left their sacred footprints along its shores during the slow-moving centuries. Like the Ganges and the Jamuna, the Indus has long been considered a sacred river by some of the native people. The old city of Jaipur. August the 16th, we went on to Jaipur, a native kingdom, where members of the party were entertained in a lovely home of an old satsangi. When we went to leave this place after 2 days' delightful visit and rest, this disciple offered his thanks to the host for his kindness. But he replied, "I am not the host. That is the Master. He gives everything." And that well illustrates the attitude of the average satsangi. They regard the Master as the giver of all good. Light shines in the darkness. One afternoon, we visited the old and long-abandoned palace of this kingdom. It was built some 500 years ago, and is now only a magnificent pile of ruins in weather-worn marble. In the midst is a temple to the goddess Shakti, to whom formerly even humans were often sacrificed, but now she gets only animals on certain festivals. As our Master stood before this ancient temple of idolatry, he the very acme of modern intelligence and spiritual illumination, this disciple recalled the biblical reference to Jesus. The light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. That was equally true at the moment where we stood. As we were about to leave these splendid ruins, a huge monument of vanished empire and faded glory, we paused and looked back for a moment. The old palace is on a mountain top, and in the days of its glory was quite a fortress. Across the valley, the green and purple of hills and sky mingled with the red and gold of a beautiful sunset. The Master turned and said to the young doctor, who was acting as our guide and escort, "One who goes inside will see many palaces, rare and beautiful buildings, landscapes, gardens, and all sorts of scenes vastly more beautiful than any that an earthly Raja ever built, or that man ever saw on this plain." As he spoke, his voice was tender as that of a father, and in his eyes was light not of this world. The birthplace of Krishna. Late in the evening, we took a train for our next stop at Mathura, the birthplace of Krishna. To all Orthodox Hindus, this town is as sacred as Bethlehem is to the Christian. Our party took a third-class compartment, the Master refusing to leave his disciples for greater personal comforts. He never thinks of himself, and is quite indifferent to physical hardships. So the dear father had his bedding unrolled and lay on a hard bench, this disciple having the good fortune to be placed on the bench alongside of the Master, only a board between us. As the disciple lay there during the long hours of the night, he found but little inclination to sleep. He was trying in his inmost being to realize the situation in its right proportions. By his side lay the human form of the Lord of vast regions of light. He lay there so quietly, so utterly unpretentious, so humble, and yet in those bright upper regions so familiar to him, and through which he travels in the utmost splendour. His very garments are more gorgeous than any royal purple, and wherever he goes, untold thousands bow down to him as their Lord and King. Notwithstanding all of that, here tonight he humbly rests on a hard wooden bench in a third-class railway car while it rumbles along through the darkness and the dust. It is almost too much for human thought, but we know it is a literal fact. The Master's keen sense of humour. The next day, as we rode along in the jostling old car, the Master told a story of some foolish weavers who had a rickety, noisy old cart. One day, when it ceased to make as much noise as usual, they concluded that it must be dead. So they stopped by the roadside and actually cremated the old cart, throwing the iron parts as bones into the river. The Master laughed so heartily that it was a joy to us all. In fact, he is always jolly and full of fun. He never fails to see the humorous side of things. He and his closest disciples laugh and joke much, and there is seldom a dull moment. All are happy and have a good time. There is no long face in the crowd, and why shouldn't they be happy? They have infinite wealth and power. Their lives are no longer limited to this land of shadow and trouble. They can rise at will into regions of unclouded splendour. They are the beloved sons of the Great Father, and they have only to ask what they will, and it is theirs. And the beauty of it is that they know all of this to be true, and are now in possession of it. It is not something to be dreamed of as a far-off inheritance, and it is not a matter of faith. They have it now, and they know it, and so they are the happiest people on earth. Their job can never be put into words, and it is quite incomprehensible to the average man of the world. Sunset on the Jamuna River. We arrived in Mathura on the morning of the 20th. Here are many interesting places, all sacred to the memory of Krishna. The city is situated along the west bank of the Jamuna. The one thing long to be remembered in connection with our visit to this place was the boat ride across the Jamuna River at sunset. The beloved Master always does things the right way and at the right time. When our party was told to get into a small flatboat, this disciple had no idea of what was coming. The boat was pulled upstream along the shore for some distance, and then pushed off and allowed to drift across and downstream to the opposite shore. The river here is about 1/4 mile wide. The scene grew more beautiful every moment. Now we could see the city spread out along the western shore. The sun was nearing the horizon, and the most gorgeous colours streaked across the sky. It was one of the most beautiful sunsets ever witnessed. No artist could paint it. Deep red and gold clothed the low-hanging clouds in glory, changing into purple a little higher up, and finally shading off to pale lavender and light blue high up in the sky. At last the sun dropped down below a purple curtain, and suddenly spread out upon the river a great sheet of gold. This disciple sat at the feet of the Master as he watched the sun go down at last behind the city. The Master sat quietly talking to a few inquirers concerning the way to approach the inner worlds. His face was suffused with a holy light which was more beautiful than that of the golden sunset. Someone remarked to the Master of the great beauty of the sunset colours. Glancing towards the west for a moment, he said, "Yes, it is much like the colours in Trikuti, the second region." As we drifted across the river toward the city, whose lights were now beginning to be reflected in the rippling waters of the river, a disciple remarked to the Master that he wondered how many real Mahatmas had crossed this river since first it began to flow. He smiled and said, "Many. And some of us believe that we had the honour and privilege of crossing that river today in a little flat boat with one of the greatest of all masters who have ever crossed the sacred waters of the Jamuna." The fire-waving ceremony. As we drifted back across the river toward the city, the gorgeous sun slowly vanishing, the dark mantle of night dropped over her, and then 10,000 lights seemed to suddenly pierce the shadows. Our boat was finally drawn up to shore, just beneath an old temple where a fire-waving ceremony was about to begin. A sort of pyramid-shaped light was formed, consisting of many smaller lights. This was held up by a priest and waved back and forth. The Master explained that this was a sort of crude imitation of the light to be seen in Sahansdal Kamal, the first station on our inward journey. But the priests have long ago lost all knowledge of its origin and inner meaning. The Master said he had brought this disciple here that he might get a look backward into the remote past of the Hindu religion. Krishna was born here perhaps 5,000 years ago, or it may be 10,000. The Vedas had their origins in those times, and in them little is said of the higher regions. Light again shines in the darkness. Our next visit was to a magnificent temple in the heart of the city. It has an imposing marble front, floors and columns. It cost vast sums of money, all contributed by devotees, and is now a source of a very handsome income to the priests. For all who enter its sacred walls must pay, and it is constantly thronged by visitors. But they refused this disciple admittance, although the other members of our party assured the priests that he was of the same religion as themselves. Evidently, the pigment in his skin was not sufficient. Afterwards, the master laughed and said next time they would doll me up with some paint and a turban. This experience only confirms the old statement that one must be born into the Hindu religion. He cannot enter it by conversion. By conversation with the priests at another time, it became evident that they could not give any reason for this attitude. It was simply the established custom, and that was the end of all argument. To the Hindu, custom is the one law that cannot be broken. The others reported that as soon as the master entered the temple, word was quickly passed around that a holy man was present, and dozens of the worshippers came and prostrated themselves before him, leaving their idols. Then hundreds more stood in respectful attention while the master spoke to them briefly of the way to go inside and see for themselves all of the lights and worlds that are there. Even the priests forgot their collection of money from the visitors and stood at attention, listening to the master's words. He told them of the sound current by which alone men might rise to higher regions and gain eternal life and freedom from the wheel of birth and death. It presented a strange spectacle. There stood the real master in the very centre and heart of orthodox Hinduism, expounding his message of light, while both priests and devotees forgot all else as they listened to him. It was another instance of the light shining into the darkness, this time at the most sacred point of ancient Hinduism. Whether any of them comprehended or profited by that light, we could not say, but this we know: the master never idles away his time, not even in sightseeing. When our party had witnessed this inspiring demonstration, they understood why the master had visited this old temple of the gods. To him, it was not just a sightseeing trip, but was a part of his mission to disseminate the light wherever men walk in darkness. Master's message to the Broks. We have not yet reached Agra, the main objective of our trip. Much of interest has already been omitted, and yet this letter has reached its limit. The rest must wait until next time. This letter cannot close, however, until a message from the beloved master has been recorded. He desired to express his appreciation of the long and faithful service rendered by Dr. and Mrs. Brock of Port Angeles, Washington, on behalf of Sant Mat and the American students. He sends to them particularly his love and blessing. Every disciple, now on the Pacific coast, and their fellow student now in India, owes to the Brocks a debt of eternal gratitude. It has been through them that most of the others have received the light since it was first taken to the coast by Care Singh Sasmas over 20 years ago. And to this noble soul also we are all greatly indebted. Sant Mat disciple most fortunate. This disciple wishes profoundly that it could come within the power of human words, either spoken or written, to convey a proper sense or estimate of the wealth we have come upon through initiation into Sant Mat. But the story can never be told. It must be experienced in the innermost depths of the soul. You should permit nothing to ever cause you to deviate from this shining path. Full realization will come in due time, and perhaps sooner than you expect. Suddenly, some day, the golden glory will dawn upon you, and then you will not need to have any man tell you aught of the path. The little spark that now draws you on will have become the infinite light, flooding all your souls with unutterable joy. Cordially, your brother at his holy feet, Julian P. Johnson.